Welcome to the third video on annelids, following on from the first two. We looked at their body plan, general characteristics. Now we're going to look at some of these actual annelid worms, see how they live so that you can recognize them when you're out in the environment. And we'll start with hunting carnivores. These will usually have several pairs of eyes, jaws. They're generally poisonous, as in they have toxins that they inject when they bite. They sometimes can just crush up prey with their jaws. They usually live in the substrate or underneath rocks. You can turn over rocks in the sandy shores and mud flats, and you'll find lots of these glycerids crawling around. So if you don't believe that they're amazing predators, here you can see a annelid worm, this fireworm, which is on top of a coral. So this is a tropical one, but it's eating this fish that it's captured. This is a typical worm that you find in the substrate that is predatory, and you can see the some of the things the features that it's got, like all of these different nice little parapodia for gripping and crawling through the substrate. Here's the Prostomiam, and one of the features of these predators is they often, there's the Prostomiam as well, which is the head, they often have a pharynx that can avert out, and it can come way out of the body and comes out very quickly, and then grasps a hold with these jaws right here, which they look like little vampire teeth or something like that, and usually will inject poison. So they're like a cobra or something like that suddenly shoots this pharynx out, grasps a hold of the prey, and poisons it. Here's some jaws you'll find in polychaetes. They have, let me just get my little drawer up here, and so here are some that have the jaws or the support system for the teeth, and then you'll see these ones and these ones. You can see how good they are for gripping prey, and then possibly masticating them, or possibly ripping them to pieces and then chewing them whole. Moving on to deposit feeding. Okay, this is a basking shark, obviously not an annelid worm, but this gives you the idea of what deposit feeding can be like, especially non-selective deposit feeding, where they just eat any old dirt. So this thing is going through and just ingesting whatever's in front of it, straining out the particles in the water. So deposit feeding worms are much like this. If they're non-selective, they just eat any old dirt, whatever's in the substrate, and selective ones will eat selected particles. Now, what these things do is often eat the little bit of essentially the slime layer of bacteria off of the particles that they're ingesting, the little sand grains or clay grains that they're ingesting. Well, essentially, this is what we just talked about in the last slide. Some of them build little tubes that they live in, and some of them just have an area that they've dug out, like this one, this Arenicola. So what they do is they dig this hole out here, and bits of particulate matter will slide down into this thing, and then it sort of fluidizes the water and the little grains, and ingests them, and then you see these little poo piles out on the sand flats, and you know that you're in the area where lots of these deposit feeding worms live. So some of them will make these little tubes, like I pointed out, and when we're at Fitianga, you'll see these things. What they do is they take a little bit of mucus and they stick little grains of sand or whatever they can find together in order to make these little burrow liners. Some of them are more selective. So with spaghetti worms, for example, they have little tentacles that go out, and then they use cilia in order to move particles towards the mouth along the tentacles. So these ones will select the little organic snow that has settled down on the surface and eat the stuff that is nutritious. Here's how it works. So you can see the tentacles here all over the place. And so in this case, this is one that has built a little tube around itself right here. Here's what the tube looks like around that it can use this for protection, and it can go out onto the it'll come out of this little tube and selectively deposit feed along the whatever's deposited there. Or these other ones just leave their tentacles out. These spaghetti worms just leave their tentacles out on the surface and pick up whatever they can find that settles down, that rains down on the shell or the sand or the mud flat where they're living. Here's a nice picture of a tube worm tube that is stuck up above the substrate. And one of the great things that you can see about this is that not only is it the protection for the tube worm, but also look at all the little microhabitats that have been created, and this can add to diversity. You can see the algae growing on it. It helps with productivity and diversity of that environment. Here is a picture of some of the spaghetti worm tentacles that have come out. You'll often find these in areas with a little bit of current at the with a rocky shore on this next to that area of current when you're diving, and you'll find these tentacles. You can see that they're quite distinct and they stick out, so that if you touch one of them or two of them, they'll all withdraw back into the tube. But they're in areas where they sort of like to hide under rocks, so that the tentacles are out where things will be brought by the current and settle down into that area. Here's another picture, spaghetti worm. Here's a picture of a spaghetti worm, and you can see that it has been removed from its hole. But here you can see things like the parapodia and the setae and all the segmentation right here. See every one of these little segments. So you know it's a segmented worm. It's got frilly gills. Now, why we have this one here, I have no idea, because this is actually a predator. But you can still see the segments lined up and the parapodia and setae on both, on each of the segments. Near them. And here are the little palps, the radials of a Christmas tree worm. This is a type of worm that you'll see. There are lots of different kinds of fan worms, but you'll see these diving at Pilot Bay along the cable. Lots and lots of them. If you're stealthy, you can find them. Here is the bilateral symmetry. Here is a little operculum, which is a little cap they can pull down over them. If you remember the operculum from gastropods, it covers the snail when it withdraws into its shell, and that's the same job that this operculum has. It's a little cap that goes over the tube when these things withdraw back down into the tube. So the cilia beat and produce a little water current that takes the water across them, and then they filter out any little particles that are in the water column. Here's another type of fan worm. This isn't one that's so spiraled, but these ones are more feathery, so it's sort of feather duster worm, right? And here's one that's out. You can see the feather duster appendage here. Why it's out like this, I'm not sure, but Here you go. Look, you can see the different segments. And if you look closely here, you can see the setae and parapodia. Here's another beautiful feather duster worm. It's a local one. Really are stunning. And here's what it looks like withdrawn into its tube. You can stop the video if you like, but this is exactly what we pretty much just talked about. Some are not predators, even though they have jaws. What they do is blow a bubble of mucus, and essentially anything that that is in the water column and settles down onto that bubble or sticks to that bubble when it's floating by will then be collected. They just suck that mucousy bubble in, chew it up, and then digest whatever organic material is on that bubble.